Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
Find the way, whatever that way is for you, that you can ensure that your spirit and your positivity and your attitude and your confidence remain intact. If there is a bout and a time where you feel lesser than, remember that people can't do that to you. Only you can do that.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's podcast, I'm talking with Yvonne Connolly. We're going to be discussing the topic of ageism. This is a topic we've been hearing about more and more, especially when it comes to ageism in job searching. And it's something that Yvonne has had some experience dealing with as well in her own job search. So, Yvonne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carolyn. Happy to be here.
How do you define ageism?
For me, ageism is about stereotyping someone either at first glance, first look, first voice, first piece of paper, and putting them into this box that says older than. It's this almost like placing out of the workforce, placing out of almost mainstream America as if, we've stopped functioning and living because we've attained this age. As I said to someone yesterday, my brain did not fall out when I turned 40.
Yeah, from what I've read and heard about ageism, it seems like age 40 is really that age where some people start experiencing ageism in the workplace and in their job searches. In the tech world, I've heard it can even start as early as age 30. Do you see ageism as being more prevalent now than it has been in the past?
Definitely. I would say at least the last 6 or 7 years, probably longer than that, but where to me it's reached a level where it's having some really severe negative effects. I would say the last 2-3 years, to me it's been something that's daily. It sort of started with, maybe we'll experience this every month, every year. Now it's almost like this all-day daily thing.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that ageism is really coming to a head at this moment in time.
The interesting thing is you notice how people begin treating you differently. And at first, you kind of said, it's just you. But then it became like so commonplace. And, for a long time, I always thought this was my problem. I realized, no, this is not just happening to me, because I would talk to other people about it, men and women of all ages, and I was hearing some common threads in our conversations. So I realized this is not so unusual. Here's the thing about this topic. People will say, oh, wah, 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 right? And, in the beginning, it almost seems like a little bit of a joke. But just like any of the conversations we're having in the world today, if that's what you're hearing and that's what you're feeling, that's a real thing. You don't have to keep this inside anymore or internalize it because it's real. It's happening and it's a common occurrence. And I feel like, okay, well, I'm going to start my own hashtag and it's going to be hashtag my age. I want a movement too. Mm-hmm. I think it's that important of a topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about your experience with ageism. When did you start to notice it and how has it impacted you personally?
I think for some of it, it was, again, you sort of get put into this little box that says, we're going to keep you there. So you start noticing that maybe someone's making a comment. One of the things I see is people are talking over you because they're not listening to you. They don't think you have something to say. Recently, I actually had someone tell me in a phone conversation, oh, well, you have an older voice. You must not be a young person. That's almost verbatim what I was told. So if people feel comfortable to actually say that, imagine what they're not saying. Imagine what they're thinking. Right. That's something I've experienced. I've gone on interviews where they have actually said things like, I thought you'd be younger. I thought you would be taller. Wow. Which to me are like roundabout ways. Really? Like there shouldn't even be any dialogue around anything about what I look like. Whether you're intimating that I'm old or whether you're intimating that I'm short. I don't need to have a label like that at all, particularly in an interview.
Right. Yeah, and what's that got to do with the role?
Exactly.
Right.
What's the role?
Yeah.
You just hear all kinds of things. Maybe on the phone, you're chatting with them. Maybe they don't know how old you are. Because, our resumes now don't necessarily reflect our ages, do they?
Right.
You have this phenomenal phone interview. You go in person, maybe more than once, and all of a sudden you're getting things like, we've decided to go in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to fill this role right now. We realize that maybe this role is going to be less than what you'd like it to be. Or we've decided to make this more entry level. Like I said in the beginning, I didn't read much into it until I started hearing it over and over and over. Same catchphrases. They weren't even unique anymore. And that's when I began realizing, well, if you're doing a data analysis, what do they say about repetition? Doesn't that become a norm? It just became really obvious to me. Even when you go in the interview, and I had one recently, interviewed, told them my salary, which, by the way, I'm already down to about half of where I used to be. I've dumbed my salary down just to get my feet in any door. And this particular hiring manager said, oh, no, that's not where we're going to be at. And I said, well, why don't you tell me where your range is? You know how they tap dance around that. And there's no reason to do that. You've got a budget, say what the budget is. Yeah. So, that was sort of an impasse. But here's the crazy part. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not moving on. Well, that afternoon I got invited back. Doesn't that say to you, okay, they've accepted the range I requested? So now I go in and I interview with the 3 governing principals. What they did for an hour is try to find every loophole in my resume they could find. It was like, why did that happen? Why do you have, a job every year? And if I'd say, this company closed, and then 3 years later I was with another company, they closed, then they were starting to make comments like, oh, let me guess, your 3rd company closed, right? How about your 4th? Did they close too?
I don't understand why someone would bring you in and then interrogate you. Like, what's the purpose of that? It doesn't make any sense.
It's almost like they wanted to prove something, either to me or to the hiring manager, like, why did you bring this person? I'm going to tear holes, as if I was a spy. And in the end, I just felt so demoralized by that conversation. I felt like saying, gosh, nobody wants to lose their job. Mm-hmm. That's not what they're looking to do. So the line of questioning was so absurd to me. I felt like saying, gee, my husband and I lost our jobs within a month of each other 6 years ago. We didn't have the luxury of looking for the perfect fit, right. But I stayed gainfully employed in a million different ways. Contract work, working 3 and 4 jobs, whatever. Here, this person was just trying to blow holes in the background.
Certainly with having shorter terms of jobs, those days of spending your whole life at one company, that's very, very rare these days. So I think more and more people have that type of experience.
Of course. Things like looking at my clothes, looking at my shoes, looking at my haircut, commenting on that. Actually commenting on things that I've worn, and it's so brazen. Here's what happens. You become so demoralized, you almost start believing these people, like it must be my fault. It's time to bring it out into the open.
I know it's small comfort, especially for people who are job searching, but it seems like those types of organizations, if you've got people acting like that in the interview stage, it's probably not an organization that you'd want to work with because, if they're supposed to be on their best behavior, if you're interviewing, then they're revealing themselves early in the process.
Well, of course not. And, we agree on that. It's just hard to find that company that you think has a wonderful diversity and inclusion program in place. And I include many things in diversity and inclusion. It's just finding the companies that will open a door for you to prove yourself and sell yourself and show what you're made of. I've been interviewed by people recently who are consultants, yet they don't even know the role. Can you tell me why I'm not moving forward? No, have no idea. I really don't know the company or the role, but I've just been asked to interview people and help them in the process. How is that possible?
Yeah.
How is that possible? So you can't give me any feedback, how about on a personal level? And I always love feedback. Please, it helps me grow. It helps me think about my next interview, but very, very few people. I think maybe 2% of anyone I've interviewed within the last 10 years has ever given me any kind of constructive advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's rare in the job search, and I'm sure some people are afraid to say anything for whatever reasons, or in some cases they may literally not know, like the example you gave.
Sure, but that was kind of odd to me. But anyway, these are the things I think in ageism that we find. I'm hoping a movement does occur.
I think more and more people are being impacted by this, just the way our demographics in this country have been evolving. You've got people who are staying in the workforce longer. Even my generation, Generation X, is getting past 40 or close to it. Pretty soon there won't be many people who aren't potentially impacted by this. And then there's the younger generation, the millennials, who may be having their own experiences with ageism. They have their own challenges with that.
I think with ageism, and that's a great point, I want to make sure I'm really clear. I'm speaking certainly from my vantage point. Of course, I'll say, because I'm a seasoned worker, employee, I do talk to those that are young, and I'm not going to label them either, because I don't think the term millennial is very fair. If they're called millennials, what am I called? A gerennial? Geriatric millennial? I don't know. I don't want to put labels on anyone, but, I think the reverse is true. It's almost like these extreme ends are really struggling. I think about this Me Too movement, and I wish those of us that do experience ageism, will any of us call out people that we feel we can expose? Do I feel like I could go on LinkedIn and really slam the door shut on absolutely any opportunity if I start calling out recruiters that I feel are discriminating? Or if I start naming names or talking about, hey, I had a recent interview yesterday. Well, that interviewer is on LinkedIn. What's going to happen then? And so I see so many parallels with the Me Too movement. The fear, the absolute fear, and the internalizing of that fear and the trauma that causes and the ripple effect. You begin carrying it home in your relationships.
And I think also the concern, and another parallel I see with that, is just being told, that's not really what it is. It was something else. Which, and in some cases, you can't really tell it's a feeling, but in some of the examples you gave earlier about, I thought you'd be younger, that's pretty obvious. So there are some pretty egregious examples.
And Carolyn, you can gauge people's reactions on the face. Some of them can't hold back. They're surprised and so forth. I could go on and on with different comments. I wish I could save them. I could make this little book. It could maybe even be something humorous, but really it's not. I see it even day to day now, truthfully. I'm relegated to some of the most menial tasks, or it's like I'm treated with kid gloves, I don't know if you can handle this, but what I'd like you to do is, that kind of tone. I've been out and now asked, how old are you, by the way?
Wow.
I can't even begin to tell you. It just goes on and on. And again, if you say it out loud, people think it's sour grapes. Oh, you're just saying that because you didn't get that job or that job or that job. Well, how about the 100th job or the 200th job? We can change. We can be proud of what we've done and what we bring. When I look back on my own career, I remember being an HR manager by the time I was 27. That's so different than what's happening now in terms of, young people taking on some major roles. I earned it. I worked extremely hard. Here's the big difference. I worked in an environment that was so incredibly diverse, age-wise particularly. I had so many resources at my fingertips. I had so many mentors and people I looked up to when I took on that role. They became my mentors. I held on to everything they taught me. I sought them out because truthfully at 27, I was scared to death every day that I went to work. Even though I was confident and cocky in many, many things, I think as many young people are, there was a part of me that was super scared because I was surrounded by these really smart, intelligent men and women who worked very hard to get where they were. So I couldn't wait to glean information from them. Now you don't have that because you might go into a workplace where 98% of the people are under 30. So where's the fabric? Where are the different layers? Where is the variety and where are all the resources? So I think that's why a lot of young companies, particularly in the tech world maybe, are having so many issues. They're not grown up yet. There's not a lot of grown-ups in their environment to help pave the way.
Right. You really need that balance of people from different backgrounds, different ages, different levels of experience. And,
Sure.
I certainly remember learning from people who had been in the workforce when I first started out at my first big corporate job. And, in my experience, there weren't a whole lot of young people working with me when I first started out. Now I do see some diversity of age. But one thing I notice, and maybe it's just my view because I work in learning and development and training, is that a lot of companies, sometimes they just kind of throw you into the business and you wind up learning that way when you're new. And, it's challenging. In my role, I really try to guide people through that as much as I can with putting together programs. But a lot of times those just don't exist. And it's hard coming in at any age. And if you're coming into a new company, it's hard to learn from people sometimes.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, that's what I'm saying about mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I find my most successful experiences have been when I've had mentors and people I look up to, and vice versa. I love being a mentor. I pride myself on that. And I've established some really great relationships because of that mentorship. People I'm still in contact with from 10, 15, 20 years ago who will say, I learned so much from you, or I remember this and this and this. And I'm the same way. And guess what? I still want that. Mentoring crosses all barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And the moral of that is we learn from each other, regardless of age.
Yeah, it's really important to be able to learn from different people's experiences and perspectives in the workplace.
Don't forget, diversity gives you such a beautiful plethora of interpretation and ideas and strategic thinking and just this wonderful multi-layered place of employment where there's not one lane. There could be many lanes for one problem, solution, idea, whatever. And that's what a diverse relationship does. It opens up doors in your mind. And gosh, there's no greater growth than the synergy of other people.
And just with the accelerated rate of change in business and technology and life, you really need to have different perspectives to understand what are some new ideas we can come up with, how can we take advantage of new opportunities quickly, just to pull on different people's experiences and skill sets. I think it's even more important than it has been in the past.
Even personalities. I mean, anyone who's in the workforce really has to work with a myriad of personalities. Well, that's what you learn in a workplace that's diverse.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked quite a lot about mentorship as one of the great advantages of having a workforce that's diverse in age. What other things do you think employers are missing out on by not hiring people who are over a certain age?
There's the tangibles and the intangibles. And I think sometimes the intangibles are far greater and of more importance than the tangibles. So for instance, for me, I'll just use positivity and the feeling that I want to give my company my all, especially one that I love. I feel honored and privileged to be here. Our ability to take a mission statement and weave it into everything we do on a daily basis. I think with experience, we become proactive. We excel at prioritizing. You learn how to think on your feet, to embrace change and the ripple effects of change because we've experienced it. Now, I know I'm lumping people my age into this category. I know not everyone is this kind of person. Some are leaders, some are workers, some are in between. I'm just saying in general, here are some characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see.
From a tangible perspective, I think most of us are computer literate. And if there's something we need to learn, we know what it takes to learn. We have the capacity. We know I'm not going to get ahead. I can't do my job if I don't learn this. We also know processes. We know what it takes to make something work from beginning to end. And that includes implementation. And in the world of technology, implementation is critical. And testing, and all of that. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the years of experience and a lot of the trial and error that just comes with being in the workforce and trying different things over long periods of time. I notice that it's really important for developing the skill of adaptability. Being able to work with different types of managers and coworkers, personalities, work styles. It's something you have to have experience working for in organizations where you're together with people for many years and you've got different people coming in and out of there. So when you're just starting out, you haven't really had time yet to learn that, and you wouldn't be expected to know that right off the bat. But over decades of work, you've kind of been through all kinds of situations and crises, and you learn to manage through them. So that adaptability is important in the workplace, and it tends to come with a lot of years of experience. What else do you think?
I would say we're also fairly calm under pressure. We know how to unwrap a situation and look at its parts as parts and as a whole. And again, that just comes from years of trial and error, as you said.
Yeah, there are just so many advantages. Since you've been dealing with ageism, I'm curious to know, what advice would you have for other people who are also experiencing ageism?
I think the hardest thing is what happens inside of us first. And that's just an erosion of our attitudes and our joy and our spirit and our confidence for sure. So I guess one of the first things I'd say is find the way, whatever that way is for you, that you can ensure that your spirit and your positivity and your attitude and your confidence remain intact. If there is a bout and a time where you feel lesser than, remember that people can't do that to you. Only you can do that. So it's important not to blame yourself and criticize yourself. That doesn't mean we can't do things better, regroup and learn and so forth. But it's really critical that we stay whole. For me, it's, I bake bread, I garden, I exercise, I'm an avid exerciser, I hike. I talk to people, I've talked to you. So whatever it is, find your jam, and make sure you keep yourself intact. So once that's happened, I like to pick people's brains. Take what everyone has to say, mush it up together and, sort out what speaks to you. What reflects you truthfully? Don't be someone you're not. So, I've gone to recruiters. I've gone to a million different people asking for advice, help, a sounding board, your ear, anything that will help me be better in my approach, in my delivery. How can I present myself? Even am I barking up the wrong trees? So I think as much as you can, people call it networking, but I think it's really more than that. I really think it's talking to people who you really feel comfortable with. Now, I met you and instantly felt comfortable. So it doesn't have to be someone where you've had a long-term relationship. Someone who you feel has something to offer you that no one else does or that you need. So I would say reach out. If you can't do it verbally or face-to-face, maybe do it in a letter or an email or a text. You kind of have to put yourself out there. Again, when you do, don't let someone else paint the picture of who you are. Go forth. It's not you, it's them.
It's important to have that grounding and know who you are, what your skills are, and what you want. And it's interesting about networking. I think that word tends to get a bad rap. I know when I first started networking, I thought of it as being salesy, like pitching people and trying to get them to do things for me when I first started networking. And that was just so horrifying to me personally to think of it like that. But as you said, it's really about learning from each other. Everyone has something that we can learn about, and we can use this to help build relationships and potentially help each other. For me, that's a more positive way of thinking about networking.
Exactly. The other thing is something you just said, too, to keep in mind. Not a lot of people can say to someone they've met or known for a long time, hey, you see if there's a job at your company, or I'm looking for a job, whatever. They have a hard time saying that. There's no need to say that. I think maybe if that's not your thing, to be so forward, just to say, I could use your advice.
Yes.
I'm in the job market, and, I'd appreciate your viewpoint. Because see, what happens then is you didn't ask that person for a job. You asked them for their help. But down the line, they may say, I talked to Yvonne, this, woman Yvonne about a month ago. I have her number. Something came up. You know what? I'm wondering if this is something she'd be in. I don't even know if she's looking or still looking. It's funny how that soft approach really can work as well, right?
It does. And I've tried different types of networking myself. So, I've known some people who are very forward, very comfortable with asking, I'm looking for this job. Please keep me in mind. But I've also had success with saying to people, I'd love to talk to you for a couple minutes. I could use your advice. This is the sort of thing I'm looking to do next. This is my experience. What advice would you give me? It's kind of a softer approach. You're not asking for a job, even though people can figure out that if they had a job opening, you'd sure love to hear about it, but it doesn't put them on the spot. You share and you learn about each other, and it can be a really effective way to network.
Exactly. It makes them feel good. You've established a real connection. Something that's not abrasive. It's just nice, soft connection. I think the other thing that has helped me, or I would say will help others, narrow your search a little bit each day. You don't have to do 100 companies a day, whether it's a type of company, a size of a company, a particular role. And actually go to the website. See if you can find a person via either the website or LinkedIn, where maybe you can do a direct approach via email. Even if it's the title, I'm looking for a company that gives me unlimited vacation. I'm just using that. If that's important to you, just seek out those companies. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, if you are in an interview situation, like I was recently, where they're trying to poke holes in your background, one of the things I wish I had done and I will do in the future is to say, when I did a mental checklist of my role in my company, there were things that were very satisfying, but I realized there were some things and some boxes and some goals that were not checked off for me, and I don't see them in my future there, which makes me want to pursue some other opportunities. I wish I had spun some of their negativity into a more positive approach. If nothing else, it would have made me feel better. I would have been more satisfied with myself.
Yeah, I've heard of a few cases where people are in an interview where they're being treated terribly and they still have the composure and courage to say very politely, I'm sorry, I don't think this role is for me, and to cut it short of their own accord and not just kind of sit there and take it and wait for it to be over. I've really admired people who are able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I also think if you're looking for work, if you're already employed, that's one thing. But if you're not, keep busy, certainly job searching. But I would say break away from that, whether it's a hobby, volunteering, even taking on gigs that are not going to be permanent or long-term. I did a lot of that. Where I've worked at events, I've worked in retail shops, whatever it is. I've written blogs. I'd go to the gym. I went to the library. I volunteered at my local co-op. Whatever it is that gave me a release from the drudgery of job searching, find a way to break away and restore your mental health in whatever way works for you. Because the other thing is you just never know what's going to be placed in your path that could change the course of your life. The last thing about ageism to me is part of the whole movement of diversity and inclusion. It encompasses all the things that we need to change, not only in the workplace, but in the world. So I'm hoping whatever movement I can create or start around my own particular issues, that it becomes part of a greater good and change that affects many people.
Yes, and you've actually started a movement before on social media with the purpose of helping people, whether they were experiencing ageism or not. And that was through the 100 Days of Help campaign that you started. Can you tell us about 100 Days of Help?
Yes. So at first it became a parody, and I hate to say political parody, but it did. First 100 days. And my creation of this had absolutely nothing to do with politics, but I thought, 100 days is not a long time. Let me see what I can do with my 100 days. And what I did is I just tasked myself and others to just commit to 100 days to help those that are in the job search marketplace, whether it was a veteran, whether it was a recent college graduate, whether it was someone who was just laid off. It didn't matter. Connect them to the hiring manager. Connect them to resources, whether it was a resume, a company, a coach, a life coach, a work coach, even a shoulder to cry on, so to speak. Whatever that was, commit to 100 days to reach out and embrace those that are suffering so dramatically in the workplace. And it really had an enormous impact on me. And I think many who joined in that effort were still doing it. Maybe we're not all calling it 100 Days of Help, but I think this LinkedIn community really came to life. in a beautiful way. It did for me.
Yeah, and I remember this was primarily a campaign on LinkedIn and that you had a hashtag, which was hashtag 100 Days of Help. Is that primarily how you shared opportunities for helping people?
So it became a hashtag that I used on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, the response was overwhelming. In fact, to the point where even someone who worked at Google said, hey, this has gotten back to some of the small team at Google and we applaud you. We think this is amazing. Where I really felt it was with veterans. I feel incredible that I was able to make a difference in someone who's given their life in this country.
Wow. So it sounds like you were able to connect a lot of people to the job searching resources that they needed.
Oh, definitely. I mean, in some cases, I was able to secure interviews for people, and I still do it, not to the extent that I was, but I'm still on there. I'm always looking. Today, I shared 2 jobs with people that I thought could benefit.
Wow. I think we need more people doing that, just watching out for each other. It's always nice to know when you're in a job search that someone out there is thinking of you and keeping you in mind. So, thinking about your own job search, what are you looking for in your next role or your next company?
You know, what it comes down to, for me, it's the company. I really want to be in a company that promotes, values, encourages, and really believes in everything we were talking about today. And that the culture that they created because of that is so phenomenal that the work you do supersedes and excels anything you'd see at any other company. I want to do extraordinary work. And a company like that allows all of us to do extraordinary work. No matter how small or large that work is or that project, I'm looking first for the company. Someone who says, not only do we want someone like her, we need someone like her.
And what type of roles are you looking for at these companies?
Well, I do love training and development because that feeds into my mentorship. You know, the kind of thing that really excites me. I'm passionate about things like that. So sure, training and development would be great. I love things that will allow me to be creative. So from an operational standpoint, that means creating new spaces, creating important meetings, creating processes that allow people to do their job better, more efficient. You know, all those things. I think that, I guess now we lump into this thing called operations. I loved having a staff, you know, anywhere where I could mentor, but I don't have to be that person. I don't mind starting something new because someone sees potential and talent in me and help me grow. You know, I hope to work for a long time.
Wonderful. Yeah, I can see how that all fits together.
It does kind of fit together.
Well, if any of our listeners have any suggestions for companies with great cultures to work for, or if they just want to get in touch with you to talk more about some of the topics that we discussed today, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They're welcome to call me, leave a message. My cell phone is 215-272-0324. I welcome phone calls. Even a text that said, hey, heard your podcast, would love to chat with you. I'm very happy to receive email, which is Yvonne.Connolly@gmail, and that's YVONNE.CONNOLLY@gmail.com.
Great. And I'll also put your contact information in the show notes of this podcast. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for being a guest on my podcast today. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you for letting me be part of your launch. Be well, my friend.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player so you won't miss any episodes. You can also find all the show notes and links we discussed in this episode at our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.